Okay, I'll call to order the Wednesday, June 4th, 2025 meeting of the Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission. Please call a roll.
Commissioner Doug Neely.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner Lori Arinello.
Here.
And Chair Mike Mitchell.
Here. Thank you. Do we have any public comments?
I haven't received any, no.
Okay. Then we will move on right on to item number 3, and 3A is leases on urban renewal owned property, and that's the 2 residential houses.
Thank you. Good evening, Urban Renewal Commission. I'm James Graham, Economic Development Manager, and we're here to discuss the leases on urban renewal residential properties. On May 21st, you requested more information on the leases associated with property that we own, 214 South Tumwater Drive and 313 South 2nd Street. Now, these properties are both properties are occupied by tenants, and they're on a month-to-month lease. And so, and also the properties, you've asked us to start the process to eventually sell these properties. So that's where we are today. So I've given you information on these leases, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Neely?
Month to month.
Yeah, well, so there's no requirement on us beyond 1 month's notification to vacate those properties?
We have a property management company that will handle all those types of legalities. I found that the answer to how much time you have to serve notice varies depending on which county you live in, and the state also has its own requirement. But the general rule is 90 days. Clackamette County is 60. So based on what we do and how we do it and how long we do it, we are in a position, or we may be in a position, to give those tenants ample notice to vacate once that decision is made.
So just a couple of things too. The 313 South 2nd, which is right on the corner of Tumwater and South 2nd, when we had a survey done a while back for both of the properties, in that case, there's the discrepancy between the location of the fence between that property and the one at 221 High Street, South High Street. So the fence appears to be about multiple feet on the adjacent property line. It's pretty steep as you come down South 2nd right there, so there may be a reason why the fence was placed where it's at, but there is some, that is something we want to clean up on that property, get that fence property line cleaned up prior to any sale. And then, as I think you remember, these are both zoned institutional public, so we've started the comprehensive plan and zoning change process. We've got a pre-app set up with planning to go through that process. That's a legislate, or in this case, it'll be a zone change because it's these 2 properties. So that would go, Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Commission. So it's a full public hearing, state notice of the comprehensive plan amendment and zone change. And then we are looking at making it consistent with what's around there. So comprehensive plan would be medium density residential, zoning would be R3.5.
And you said the fence is on the next property over. It's too far onto the other
Correct.
person's property.
It makes the backyard, our backyard, look bigger than it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's a steep area.
Yeah, as you come up. So I don't know, there's a driveway on the neighbor's property. I don't know if they put it there for a safety reason or I just don't know the history. I just know it doesn't match the survey line as we see it after the survey.
Okay. And how long would you estimate the zone change process would take?
It's going to be, I think we have a minimum, I can't remember gosh, it's been so long. oh my gosh, what's the notice to DLCD? I think it's like 60 days, 60-day notice to DLCD before the first public hearing. Then we would have the public hearing at Planning Commission, and then a minimum to City Commission, adopt the ordinance first reading, second reading goes into effect 30 days. So those, it just, because of the process, usually tends to take about 120 days, 160 days, somewhere in there by the time you get it submitted, do the noticing, everything just goes into getting through the hearing process. And we're still have a pre-app that we're
Since
doing.
we own it, I don't really think it's going to be a big issue.
Well, except for if the DLDC notice is a state requirement.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm saying the whole process is
Oh,
not,
yeah.
it's not going to be a big deal. I mean,
No, it's not going to go sideways on
No,
us.
no,
Yeah.
but I mean, you know, we probably can get it.
Never
done
heard
by
that
probably
before.
October.
Pardon?
Never heard that before.
Never.
Do we have to have that cleaned up before we would be able to get it listed for sale?
What do you mean cleaned up?
I mean,
Do we have to have the zoning done before we would list the property for sale on the market?
Could be subject to.
I think if I'm a
I
buyer.
would imagine it would be an encumberment.
Right, if I'm the buyer and, you know, they're gonna see institutional where a single-family house is probably pre-existing non-conforming, so there's probably gonna be some zoning issue or underwriting issue of the zoning not being appropriate for the use. I'm just guessing. I mean, we could, get the appraisal, give the noticing, have it ready to go. We could probably hedge it a little bit, once maybe Planning Commission approves it or the first reading's done, we could put it up, but I don't know, I'd want to clean it up as much as we probably could. I'd hate to have it contingent upon a zone change and a comp plan amendment to which you're the approver of that contingent on a sale. Just rather get it cleaned up.
Commissioner Arnall?
I'm wondering if we've done sort of a site survey to see if it might need paint, a new roof, or anything to that effect recently?
No, we have not done that.
No?
No, I've been by it like in the last 2 weeks, like a couple of days ago, I went by it. I mean, obviously I didn't get out of the car and walk around, but I mean, I was across the street and I was looking at them at the same level. And, I mean, they're in decent shape.
Basic maintenance has been done throughout the years. Nothing, we haven't gone in and done floors or, kitchen, there hasn't been
No, we're not
big
doing a
investment
lot.
in these properties.
Commissioner Neely?
The zone changes being discussed, what are we talking about? What's the current zoning? What are we talking about in terms of a different zoning?
That was part of the motion I made last time, that we initiate the plan amendment and zone change from I to R and from
Oh,
institutional
that's right.
to whatever the single family
Yeah, that's
residential
right.
zone. That was
Okay.
part of the motion.
Yeah.
So we've already kind of said
Right.
we're doing that.
And
So-
we've started that process?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, where there really isn't, unless we could order the appraisal. I
We could get the appraisal going. We could probably work on notification of the tenants, give them ample time. Some of those things I think we could probably get started on if the commission's comfortable with that.
That's my thought, is if we know that we're heading in the direction of selling these properties and we're going to be asking the tenants to leave, I think that it's incumbent on us to provide literally as much notice as we can. And if we're talking about potentially an October zone change is what we're thinking, I think that we need to be as fair and reasonable as possible, recognizing that we are asking folks to vacate the properties, find another residence, and I want them to have as much time to do that as possible. So yeah, I would suggest we notify promptly.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? We probably would potentially forego a couple of months' rent, but
My only concern about it is that we have such a limited supply of single-family residential housing in, Oregon City that's available at a reasonable price point. And that's my only concern, is that, we might be displacing some, I mean, it's our property, but I mean, having somebody try to find another, rental in our community, which is not easy.
Have we reached out to the tenants?
No, not yet.
Okay, maybe we reach out to them first, after we have an appraisal in hand. Okay.
And, could we be selling these potentially as income properties? So the tenants just transfer to new ownership, or we want it to be occupied by the potential new owner? Because they could transfer and maintain their leases and continue to be rentals, just in a private relationship.
I agree. I mean, if I could wave my magic wand, I'm interested in getting people into housing so they have wealth creation, rather than, we have so many property management companies, and I know that's what you do, and yours is, probably just fine, but, it just creates better neighborhoods when you have people who have a stake in where they live and what they own. I mean, like I said, I would love to see, something that we could do to entice somebody who's a first-time home buyer to get in there. That would just be, so it's a win-win for us.
I can see the desire for that, but I don't know if we have control necessarily.
I know we don't.
Of that process.
But
And
we
the
could-
caveat to that was if we were to notify the tenants, it wouldn't be of a notice to vacate at this time. We could just let them know that we are planning to sell.
And if they're
then at that
interested-
time, new ownership chose to rent or lease or continue that lease.
Yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily mean notice to vacate.
So
So
as sellers, we can be picky about who we sell it to.
But we can't dictate whether or not they
No,
use it as
no.
rental property.
We can't, but, it can be asked. The question can be asked through whoever we're using, do you plan, are you planning to live? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do and there's a lot of things you can't do. I would just say that if we can make somebody have a happy home, that would just be great. But we'll do our best.
Commissioner Neely, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. We're talking about a 3-month notification. I presume we as a body could go ahead and say we would have a longer period of notification than 3 months. And so, in consideration of the people that are already there.
And maybe they have the means to buy it, who knows?
Commissioner Morrow?
Thank you. Yeah, just considering the land use timeline, giving them the notification now that this is something that we know we want to do, they're going to have more than the statutory minimum of time to be noticed. The other thing is I really don't want, as much as I share the goal of wanting to target certain populations, I myself would one day like to own a home. I would prefer not to complicate this and would prefer that we just put it on the market and see where that goes. So this really isn't something that I think we need to be complicating. And while I do think that the goals that have been mentioned are admirable, I feel that the affordable housing side, when it comes to the government subsidies, are something that we are making a lot of headwinds on through our metro regional dollars that are coming in, and I would like to see some properties get back into private ownership and try to encourage more people to get into the wealth building cycle that the mayor talked about, rather than a constant cycle of renting.
Mr. Mitchell, is there a way we could, maybe Mr. Graham could ask our folks that we're dealing with if they could reach out to, for instance, send a notice that it's for sale to, let's say, Habitat for Humanity or someplace like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, saying, oh, we have these available, or a place, one of the organizations called Proud Ground. I mean, there's a bunch of folks, and it would go out to everybody, but we could say, oh, by the way, we have this.
Yes, we can do an RFP out, or some type of a notice to the marketplace that these properties are for sale.
Other questions or comments?
We also need to make sure that somebody isn't going to use them for extended stay or something like that, because that's not allowed in Oregon City. That would be one of my concerns.
So perhaps move forward with an appraisal at this time?
Oh, yeah,
Well,
we can do
engaging
it.
a real
I'm just going to try to recap, unless there's anything else,
No,
where I
let's
think
do
we're
it.
at. We continue the land use, the rezone.
Okay.
order the appraisal, notify the tenants,
Yep.
and work on the fence
Yeah,
situation.
cleaning up. Yep.
Have we had not agreement to move forward with all of
And I
that?
think I'd like to talk with James and just make sure we're on the same page concerning the notice to the current renters. We can structure something maybe where upon sale or close, then they have 30 days. I mean, we could, so that they can stay through this process and look, or if they actually wanted to be a bidder, or maybe there is someone who buys it to want to rent it and they can stay, I mean, that way, we don't have to maybe say, okay, you got 60 days and this ends up taking another 90 after that 60 days, if that's comfortable, as long as it's not jeopardizing our ability to close and, within a reasonable amount of time upon sale, agreement of sale of the property, if folks are okay with that.
Okay. Everybody all right with that?
Agreed.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next one. I'm going to make a suggestion here that we talk about 10th and Main,
Sure.
because it'll probably be a shorter discussion than the Cove discussion.
We don't need to vote on that one, that last.
Nah, I think we're good. I understand, you understand?
So we'll move on to item C, which is the 10th and Main property. Staff report on that?
922 Main Street, 10th and Main. So this property, the Urban Renewal Commission entered into a purchase and sale agreement with Willamette Stone Partners back in 2017. And there has been a number, this developer actually went through several amendments, requested several amendments to their proposal, and we were going through COVID, and a lot of things were going on at that time. The last iteration in terms of property use, the commission and the developers agreed that there would be some type of arrangement where the bottom floor would be something of a brewery and tasting room. The second floor would be a restaurant, and with seating that would extend also to the third floor onto the roof. So that was the last, and of course, and the parking, of course, would be on the first floor as well. So that was the last reiteration, but unfortunately, due to a variety of circumstances, the project never took hold and never went forward. And it was, we had it under escrow for quite a while. And that is why you don't see it in the urban renewal plan, because it was under contract. And so, so with that, so with that, we are now in the position to decide what we'd like to do with that property.
And a little bit more, we've been working on the quiet zone there at the intersection of the railroad crossing on 10th Street, right by Dutch. So this is right across the street from that. And then at the 11th Street crossing, or 12th Street crossing down a little bit, right? So that's going to be the quiet zone area. We're still working with ODOT, the railroad, the feds on the design of that quiet zone. But originally the idea was that, there was a desire for residential downtown, that this property could potentially be an opportunity to have residential in conjunction with the quiet zone that was being completed. The quiet zone's been through, funding, no funding, it's been a long time trying to get that project moving. And then even once we did get the federal earmark for that project, it's still been multiple years to get to even where we're at today, which led to the original idea of a residential or a mixed use commercial first floor residential on the upper floors. There was discussion, well, it doesn't appear you have funding for the quiet zone, so we can't do residential. So it's kind of transformed, the project's changed over time, right? From, I think, what originally was envisioned by the Urban Renewal Commission at the time, back in 2015, 2016, back then, to what seemed feasible with the developers who came in, who kind of made the proposal around brewery, restaurant, tasting room, to not being able to really bring a project to fruition. And then we had in the agreement, the ability to claw the property back if they didn't perform by a certain date, which they did not. So now we have the property back, and now it's another discussion about, how prescriptive do we want to be on what we want to see on this property? Could be put it for sale, come with offers. It could be bring us something that's a minimum of 2 stories, bring us something that's mixed use, bring us something that's residential. So I think kind of probably where the discussion is. For those of you who've driven past the property, so you're going up to 10th, you hit the railroad tracks, right? We have the candlesticks that prevent left turns. You can't turn left into Dutch Brothers. Coming down the hill, you can't turn left into this property. There'll be no access off Main Street. So at one point, the Urban Renewal Agency did discuss potentially buying the property next door, just to try to make a little bit bigger project development site, a little bit easier access into the property. That transaction never happened with the district. It obviously has 2 successful businesses in there right now.
Are you talking about Hops?
Yes.
Okay.
And so just a little context is that, essentially as you're at Main and the railroad tracks, as you're going up 10th, you're going to be turning, it's going to be a right in, right out only, kind of on the back of that tax lot, kind of closer to the railroad tracks, just from access, site distance into that property. So there are some constraints, when we talk about blight, difficult properties, this would be one of those.
Does the preliminary design on the
Quiet zone?
quiet zone, I don't know, there's an ADA ramp discussion. Does that come into that property potentially?
I'm not, it will a little bit, yes. So yeah, I was just looking back at Dana. Yeah, so yeah, to get probably some of the grades that we need. As part of that project is potential property acquisition once we get designs, plans to, far enough along to know. So there may be a little bit, yes, it sounds like we may need a little bit on that property to make the grades work.
Okay. Commissioner Arnello.
I wanted to clarify, are we still encumbered by that purchase and sale agreement with the Willamette Stone, or is that dissolved?
It is done and gone.
Okay. Okay.
DOA, as they say.
I know when we were doing the urban renewal update, right, there was we didn't really talk about this property because it was under contract. But some of the other ones, and that's why we attached, some of the thoughts about Stimson or about 12th and Main, So, I don't know, like I said, there's some detail. I think it's really how much detail does the Urban Renewal Commission want to give on what they want to see on that property, right? My worry, if we just said, just put it up for sale, right? You could end up with a 1-story building that takes up half the lot, right? And I don't know if that's what we want there, right? So I think, just providing a little bit of guidance on kind of the parameters, right? I could see kind of that during the discussions about updating the urban renewal plan, of wanting to be a little bit more prescriptive and providing a little bit more information about what we wanted on certain properties, rather than just saying, bring us ideas without any guidance. And so I'm not sure where this one falls out on that spectrum.
So what thoughts from the group on that idea?
She raised her hand first.
Go, okay, go ahead.
I might recommend this site maintain the commercial use rather than residential. There's just parking issues that I foresee coming up with this site particularly. So I think just being consistent with that strip being mostly commercial use, keeping it either office and or restaurant.
Josh, I guess the question I had, my last recollection, an interested party was commercial. Is that right?
If I'm recalling correctly, it started off as, I believe, mixed use. And then as we struggled to get funding for the quiet zone and the economy kind of changed, they came back in with a proposal that was kind of brewery, restaurant, tasting room. And I don't think there was residential
No, not in
at
that.
all.
not in that
I think it ended with no residential at all,
Yeah.
strictly commercial.
First one was residential.
I will just put out that there with community-friendly, equitable, community, CFAC, climate-friendly, equitable community requirements. This property is not going to be subject to any parking standards. But I understand, it's kind of relying on the market is going to drive the parking on the site is kind of where we're at on this property because of its location relative to the transit lines.
And the absence of parking requirements, does that depend on what the use is? Whether there's a residential component
Oh, that's a
or
good question.
mixed use or?
I have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
If I'm not sure if it's applicable. I'm not sure if the exemption is just for residential and kind of a mixed-use residential. Like if you're straight commercial, I'm not sure if our parking standards are still applicable. I'll have to check on that.
In some of the iterations on different uses for the property, the developer did show where parking was possible, putting that parking underneath the structure and building above it. At one point, the property was considered all commercial, all 2 or 3 levels of commercial. Back in 2015, there was some talk about making it all residential. But the question was, the concern was the quiet zone issues. And at the time, as the city manager mentioned, there was some question and concern about residential being that close to the railroad and the issues thereof. So it's a long history with that property.
Is there a minimum floor area ratio percentage in
Mixed-use
that area?
downtown, yeah.
Yeah.
It's low. I can pull it up real quick.
Okay.
But there is one in mixed-use downtown, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you. I would prefer that we continue pushing for mixed use. Going back to when I first started, I remember this was one of the first things that we tackled on Urban Renewal Commission, and when Willamette Stone came back with their amended plan from mixed use to what they had proposed the second time, we were all pretty uniformly, the Urban Renewal Commission at the time, opposed to that because of what we would like the future of our downtown to be, and we would like it to be vibrant with people who actually live there and can be a built-in client base for our businesses down there. And so I would be fine if the majority of it were commercial, but I do think that part of it ought to be reserved for residential. And as much as I hate CFAC and the elimination of those parking requirements, this is one area where I could see it being more feasible for someone who doesn't own a car to live there and not have to park there. As much as I, again, do not like those regulations, I can see it being more feasible at a site like that.
The minimum FAR in downtown is 0.3. It's pretty low.
Oh, yeah. So it could be a single-story building on half the site.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And keep in mind that the courthouses will at some point be developed into something. And so it might be this might be a good opportunity to keep that in mind. It might sort of complement whatever goes there as well.
Sorry, in mixed-use downtown, so we have this low floor area ratio, but then we have a minimum building height of 25 feet or 2 stories. So I suppose you could have like a fake facade. You know what I mean? Like a.
Oh. So the building height doesn't necessarily mean number of floors.
Correct.
I thought that the proposals we had looked at before were 3.
They were.
Yeah, that's what.
That was the minimum.
Right.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
wanted to keep kind of that.
Yeah, that
well,
same
I think we
profile.
wanted to kind of avoid a one-story look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could, Rocky will confirm this, and you can confirm this, but when the Enterprise Courier was there, they had parking on site. It was basically a 1.5-story building. They had their printing presses and all that kind of stuff in there, and there was parking. And they went out, I don't believe they accessed it on Main, they accessed it on the Singer Hillside, and in and out.
Commissioner Neely?
Well, since we've had interest in commercial mixed use, I would go for actually residential. Our downtown area is going to go through major changes. I imagine some of the zoning we have for office may have to change, and so more commercial opportunities may occur there. But the fact is, we really don't have any residential to speak of down there anyway. And I think but encouraging some of these properties that we own to be residential will spur that mixed-use development in terms of the whole area.
I would support mixed-use development and residential if feasible. Again, unless the quiet zone gets in there, I don't want this to sit around waiting for the quiet zone, and that's what we thought was going to happen with the William Stone project. I think we need to get that site sold, and we need to put some parameters on it so that somebody doesn't come in and build a one-story building, but they build at least a minimum of a three-story building, and that the building fit in with the sort of the footprint of the downtown in terms of, you know, a modern style, but not, you know, not steel panels and that sort of thing. Something that would give the appearance that it fits in.
Okay. So are you saying that you would be okay with strictly commercial? Or
No,
are you
I'm
saying you want
I'm-
some residential?
I'm saying that residential if feasible.
Well, that's not a yes or no.
Well, it's,
Are we
I'm
going to put out a
saying,
proposal that says you could do strictly commercial?
I'd say that if we have the quiet zone, I'm all for residential. I don't know how we're going to be able to do residential without having the quiet zone there.
Okay.
I've been in a couple of the buildings that are directly adjacent to the railroad tracks, and when, you know,
Oh, yeah.
even without the horn, it's, you know, maybe it's only rented to people who love trains. I don't know. That's how that works. Because those people love it, you know, I mean, I'm not
Thoughts
saying
over
it's
here?
terrible, I just don't know if I want to live there. Go ahead.
I agree mixed use. I agree 2 to 3 stories.
Can I just clarify real quick? When we say mixed use, are we talking commercial, residential?
Commercial, and
Residential, commercial,
Yep.
or residential office, right? Residential is the mixed, it's not commercial and office.
It could be office.
Okay, so when we say mixed use, we mean residential and something else.
Yeah, residential and something else. Okay. Is that where you were headed?
absolutely not.
No. Okay. Where were you
I mean,
headed?
so yes, residential, and I would say retail, restaurant, absolutely no offices. I don't think, that's not what the purpose of that property was for. It was always intended to be commercial in terms of retail or restaurant and living up above. I don't see supporting office there.
Commissioner Wilson?
One more question on this, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to know what the constraints are on the quiet zone, and maybe the next meeting, we could have that discussed, because it almost sounds like it's going to be long in the future, and I don't know why that should be the case. So I'd like to have a meeting to talk about this particular issue and find an update of where we are on that, because I don't know.
Okay.
You guys say more. So,
Can you provide us with some sort of a timeline on that?
Yeah, Dana, I don't know if you can, I can put you on the spot about the quiet zone as well, if you want to. Oh, quiet zone, if you could just kind of come up and we can kind of answer a couple of questions. So, you know, we've been working with multiple agencies at the state, federal level, as well as Union Pacific on the design for those 2 crossings and what they need to be. You know, I think because of the topography constraints, you know, there's some design issues that need to be addressed. I think we had 30% drawings. We received $2 million from the federal government for that project. So our goal now is to get to 60% drawings, which would then identify, you know, any property acquisition or condemnation that we need to do to accomplish the 60% design drawings, which is really going to be accommodating the infrastructure for the quiet zone, but primarily the ADA access slope, meeting slope and ramp requirements. And, you know, a timeline with these agencies, I'm 12 to 18 months, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing to work. It's ODOT who administers the federal funds for us because we're not certified. It's ODOT Rail who oversees rail in the state. It's Federal Rail Administration at the federal level. It's Union Pacific Railroad. I feel like there was one more I missed. So we're continuing to work with all of those agencies on their timeline, Union Pacific Railroad, if I didn't mention that one. Continuing to work through that, working with adjacent property owners on impacts to their businesses and how to minimize those impacts. And then the other piece that's still unclear, we have obligated our contract for design, which means we have an executed contract to spend those federal funds for the design phase. We do not have an obligated contract for construction. It's unclear at the federal level what funds will be released from those funding packages. So it's a little bit unclear still on the construction funding side.
Okay. So we
We
could
know as much as
potentially
we
find
know.
ourselves with a design, but no funding to build it.
I mean,
Correct.
ODOT has indicated that there are projects that they are not moving forward with because of the uncertainty around the funding from the federal level. We've only had one project where our funding has been what am I thinking of? Canceled, not provided to us. It had to do with EV, looking at efficiencies of buildings and whatnot. So that money is not available. It's been removed. We have this project that has a federal money of which we're already spending some of it, which is a good thing. And then we have the Washington Street project, which is $4 million, which we have not essentially entered into any contracts or agreements yet. So I think there's just a little bit of uncertainty about when you make the request for the money, what the response is going to be.
So if we were to require that residential is part of it, we could run into a situation where nobody would want to tackle it because they don't know if the quiet zone will happen or in what kind of time frame.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Morrow?
Thank you. So this is different from what I was saying about the two homes, which is that I wanted to get it listed as soon as possible and sell it to the highest bidder. For this one, I'm content with waiting for that certainty to get what we want because this is such a rare opportunity in such a unique location for us. And to go back to what Commissioner Neely said about the possibility that other commercial spaces on Main Street will be opening up, there's a lot of talk across the country about how we can facilitate conversions from commercial into residential, but that's not happening because everyone's finding out how expensive that is. And so if we don't insist upon a small amount of residential at this location and cross our fingers for the courthouse and think that magically it's going to become more feasible for those commercial to residential conversions, then we probably aren't going to see housing as we have wanted to see to make this a truly mixed use corridor. So given the constraints that have been presented to us, that's not where I would like to be, but I still believe that given the control that we have over this property, which is not very often, I would still insist that we maintain some amount of residential.
I think one thing too is, when we're doing the urban renewal plan, we kind of talked about, okay, Stimson seems like the easiest one to start with. And so we're working to get that done. And then it was, okay, what would be next? 12th in Maine or 10th in Maine, right? So, I mean, we could focus on 12th. When we were doing the update to the renewal plan, we had talked about, should we hire, get some like preliminary, just conceptual drawings of what we are seeing, what we think we're saying in our, when we talk about what we want, right? I mean, I could see a scenario, maybe we bring somebody in and we work on 10th in Maine and 12th in Maine, but we hold 12th until we know more, or, we could just try and describe it. I mean, we could go focus on a different property if we wanted to wait.
I like that idea of us maybe doing some renderings. I think it's a great idea. It takes what we've got in our heads and we can imagine what it might be.
Okay. Commissioner Arnell?
For now, I respectfully disagree on the renderings. I think that's putting the cart before the horse. I think that would be a lot of dollars spent on potential drawings with no known constraints about what the site could be. So I might hold that option for now. But I would be interested in potentially adding it back to the urban renewal plan, so people know it's kind of on our roster and holding action on that property for the time being.
I thought you moved that property forward because it's going to be so easy to get through.
Because it was what?
Yeah, yeah.
I think we could work on them at the same time.
I should never say anything like that.
I think
I'm slowly learning my lessons.
Stimson, again, we have our friends at the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Right, but we're moving.
Yeah, it's
So,
moving.
what's the group's feeling as far as Commissioner Morrow's comment that we hold off and get some certainty on the quiet zone because of the importance of residential?
Yeah, it's fine.
Is that the head nods I'm seeing? Yes? Okay.
I'm
so-
going to be neutral. I'm not nodding my head.
Oh.
But you're not-
Is anybody opposed to that idea? I don't see it. Okay. So we're going to try to make the quiet zone happen. All right, let's talk about the Cove.
I have one more
Oh,
question.
sorry, go ahead.
And I'm debating whether to ask it, but I'm gonna ask it. So being on this Urban Renewal Commission for a long time and seeing for sale signs go up and down and up and down and up and down on that property and the other property on 12th Street, some of which was because of the debate on the use and some of which was surprises that we kept getting. I don't remember the last time I heard, well, one of the issues I remember with the 10th and Main property was that part of the property was still part of Singer Hill, a street. And we had to separate, we didn't find that out until the property was up for sale, but the property went beyond into the actual street of Singer Hill, which is an issue, as you can imagine. Is that all cleaned up?
I remember, can we go back and look? So I think what had happened when the plat was originally recorded for Oregon City,
Yeah.
these lots backed up to the cliff. And then when the
They were
railroad came
never-
through, essentially they just
Chopped it off.
cut the tax lot in half. So you had a tax lot on both sides of the railroad tracks. And then you had the road over. I think it was just some older,
I just want to make sure there's
Yeah.
no surprises that we haven't figured out once we put a for sale sign up on it again, because we keep taking them down for finding other reasons and.
Great idea. So we'll look into that, right?
yes.
Okay, let's move on and talk about the Cove for a few minutes.
All right. So the Urban Renewal Agency owns a significant amount of property around what we call the Cove. It actually owns the water body itself as well. So there have been several proposals for development are on those properties and around those properties. The original idea, so where you have the Cove at Edgewater Apartments, was originally part of a larger development plan out there. Some of the original proposals, this was, we're talking pre-2008 housing crash and recession, where we had, I think, two 50 or 60,000 square foot medical office buildings kind of being an anchor middle to a plaza with condominiums on either side and what we were calling the North Park. So on the very, like along the Cove and the Clackamette River to the west of West's sewer plant area. That was going to be the North Park area. Obviously, as the economy changes, the hospitals were pulling back, office space wasn't being developed, and then the Cove at Edgewater ended up being constructed as a private development. But because Urban Renewal never actually owned that piece where the Cove at Edgewater is located, where those apartments are. We owned everything on the other side of the road. And so that developed, there were some proposals that came in, but predominantly, the office really became diminished, or it became part of a smaller kind of a commercial component, like a supporting coffee shop, maybe a supporting, water sports facility, right? Something much smaller in nature with an increase in the number of units. Originally proposed as condos. Many of you know building condos in Oregon is difficult, so it kind of turned to apartments. Another proposal came in, really trying to create more of a center plaza area with some first floor restaurants on either side to kind of be anchors of the plaza area, connecting down to an esplanade along the river, connecting the Clackamette River Trail essentially from Main Street Extension through the property up by West, connecting then to the bridge across Gladstone. Through that process, we have subdivided the properties. So essentially we did a subdivision plat of the properties. We identified the natural resource overlay district buffer. So for a water body like that, it's minimum 50 feet. So that's been put into a tract. So not developable area. It'll eventually be once graded and replanted for habitat. And then next to the tract is another tract, which would be the esplanade, essentially a minimum 20-foot wide, pathway where replacing the existing asphalt trail that is the Clackamette River Trail along the Cove there. And then I believe we subdivided that into 7 separate tax lots, 3 on each side and 1 in the middle for development, and then keeping a North Park, which is kind of transformed from kind of open space to amphitheater. There's been a lot of ideas. Early ideas had water sports, kind of using those existing steel dolphins that are in the water as dock space, moorage space, sailboat. Originally there was motorcraft, realizing you're probably not going to get motorcraft in there, so then it became more passive water sports, kayak, stand-ups, sailing. We also own a piece right at the base of Firestone Alley. So if you're come down adjacent to 99E, at the very bottom, there's a small, long, rectangular piece. And then right across the street from that is a large piece that's adjacent to the drive aisle that connects to the old Gladstone water intake facility. We own that as well. Originally, there were ideas of an office complex on that property. You were talking probably, off the top of my head, it's been a long time, but probably anywhere from 18 to 25 foot pilings to get above the 100-year flood elevation at 48 feet. It was always the 6th or 7th phase of the development. It was always the last one, just because the economics of it were very, very difficult. That kind of morphed into, should it become a trailhead? Could we use it for habitat protection? And some other ideas. I think that piece is by far the lowest and hardest of the properties to develop. That being said, considering the easy parts, is essentially, if you've ever walked out there, you know that the cliff, the shoreline is very, very steep along that cove. And if you could imagine essentially taking a 3-to-1 slope and just cutting that whole bank and kind of flipping it over, and that becomes the fill to put the buildings on to get them above 1 foot above the flood elevation, which is 48.3 or 6 or whatever it is. So, it's not just go out and build there, right? There's a significant amount of cut and fill that has to happen. There was utilizing underground parking, because that can also double as flood storage because it's open. So it's a complex site with quite a bit of earthwork mitigation and that needs to go into it. Like I said, we have boxes of plans and drawings and whatnot. So I did not attach nearly, I just scratched the surface here.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm sorry. But I know you have a long history, and B, a lot of thoughts about that site and what needs to be there versus what's been proposed. So anything, you want to lead us off?
Don't get them started.
I already did.
Well, Tony our city manager did a great job of explaining most of what I remember. I guess where I come from in all this is, what did we originally have these properties for? And it wasn't apartments, people. It wasn't office buildings. The reason Urban Renewal has these properties was for mixed use, and almost always mixed use in various capacities. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't housing components, but the first iterations of most of the concepts were majority something else, or pieces of office complexes like the Medical Plaza and other pieces. So I was really disappointed with the Cove apartments going in. Remember, those were sold and told to us in the early days as being condos, and then most of us realized fairly soon that they were never going to be condos. And then we got conned into the idea that the first floor of the existing apartments would be used as office and retail. And as soon as they were built, we were told pretty much by the developers that that is never going to happen. As you can tell if you drive by the Cove apartments today, most of the first floor is completely empty because it's sitting there waiting for retail or office that is never going to be put there. So that was a huge disaster, I think, the Cove apartments. I don't want to see that on the other side. Is there going to be a housing component to the Cove? Yeah, I'm sure there is, but if that's all we get there, then I think we've majorly screwed up. If there's no amphitheater, which in the last integration there was none, if there's no water feature, then that's a mistake. If there's no restaurants or anything to cause people to want to walk down that promenade other than the people that live there, then why have we sat on that property for so long? I just don't, I drive by the Cove today and I look at the apartments, and I mean, they're nice apartments and I'm sure people love living there, but that was never the intent of that property fully. And seeing the lower floors empty and knowing that they're probably going to be empty forever without any use, it's pretty devastating to think that we have those, that piece of property could have been rethought in so many great ways. There was times where we talked about opening up the center of the Oregon City Shopping Center and continuing Dunes Drive right through the center of the shopping center, and that way having the shopping complex face Main Street and 99E and having a connection there. I think we were stupid to do the apartments the way they are today. And so now what we've isolated is that entire piece of property on the Cove, that if it's only houses, it's all houses in a floodplain that even if they're out of the water are never going to be accessed during a flood. And where the hell are we going to put all these people? We have no plan for that. And thankfully the Cove hasn't flooded in a major time since we've built the Cove apartments, but it will. And we're going to have to solve that problem. I'm not against housing at the Cove, but it has to be well thought out. And I would personally love to see some sort of mixed-use development there, restaurants or whatever. But those are the components that a lot of people on the Urban Renewal Commission started letting go of, saying those are the things that need to be built first. Because this idea of we'll build the housing and the rest will come, it never will.
Yeah, well, I predate Commissioner Smith. I was on the Urban Renewal. In many ways I predate him, but I was on the Urban Renewal Commission when we bought the property, and I think there were various views. I'm just going to make this short. We can't develop that property unless we do cut and fill. I think the number one priority should be to work on that east bank, actually take cutting in there, get the fill. We need the fill for whatever development that goes in there. And I think that's where the number one priority should be, make it a buildable site.
Well, I don't predate either of them, but I'm not going there. My background on this property goes back to when it was originally conceived and we decided to rename Parker's Lagoon to Clackamette Cove. So going back to when I was staff, and the vision is fairly close to what Commissioner Smith said, but my involvement in it was as on the public side. I was here testifying in support of us not allowing all of the development to go forward until the park was built. And that was something that people in this community really were advocating for. I think the idea of the amphitheater, the park, and the walkway would have been a real benefit to the development. I won't go into the vagaries of the folks that we ended up getting involved with, but I agree. I mean, part of the thing is why we initiated the work on the water quality of the Cove, because we need to know that answer, but it doesn't preclude us from moving forward with some other efforts at the same time. I think we can do multiple things at the same time to get the project site ready, but I think mixed use is correct. I think, I know that we entered in some discussions with the owners of the shopping center at the time, and they were loath to think about the idea of Dunes Drive. I can't remember which one of the stores, Rocky, would that have gone through? Was it? It would have been over
Fisherman's,
towards.
yeah, or
it's
what?
through Fisherman's.
Was it Fisherman's or was it?
It was the old one.
Yeah, I mean, was it the building right next to it? Because as you look at the site, you can see that the buildings are not definitely attached to each other. It's all separate buildings. You know, there was the Emporium and then there was the thing and where all of that. But, you know, there is, I think there's still an opportunity there, and we need to get it closer to shovel ready. That's where I'm moving towards.
Yep. We're
Pretty
running up
close out of
against
time.
time. Does anybody have anything quick? Not quick, okay. Any communications?
No, sir.
I'm going to say something about when we were talking about 10th and Main. I don't know why this even popped into my head. I've never thought of it before. We have a property at 12th and Main that is heavily encumbered by easements underneath it. We own a parking lot at 13th and Main. Could we build a parking lot at 12th and Main and develop the property at 13th and Main?
We talked about that.
We did?
Yeah, when I first got on the Urban Renewal Commission. Before
What
your
happened
time.
to it? What happened to that idea?
It's still in there, still out there somewhere. We talked about that trading, and we
Yeah,
actually had
trade.
somebody that wanted to buy the property at 13th and Main, but we weren't really thrilled about their proposal.
Can we look into what constraints there would be on 13th and Main, and maybe let's just throw something else out there, right?
I think 12th
Okay.
and Main is buildable, even with the encumbrances, and we had it shown to us when the students did those projects
but-
at the high school.
That's a discussion for another time,
Right,
but you can't
okay.
do much on that site because of those easements.
You go up, yeah.
But they have to be able to get to
I know,
dig.
I understand that.
Anyway, sorry. Commissioner Morrow, is the legislature making any headway on the idea of fixing that liability issue for building condos in Oregon? Do you know?
Yes, they recently just passed a bill to, I don't know what its status is in the Senate, but in the House side, they passed a bill to reform condo liability law, and they reduced the amount of years, which is a big deal in terms of incentivizing the development of that kind of housing.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there isn't anything else, thank you, everybody. Mayor, when do you want to begin?
We're coming back at 10 after.
Okay. The commission meeting will start at 10 after, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.